Welcome to Supreme Book Dealer. My name is Wes and I am the Supreme Book Dealer, and we call this segment Books in the Trap. And our goal on this channel is to build and cultivate a community of readers, and most importantly, just talk about books because that is what we love to do. And on today's episode of Books in the Trap, we are going to be talking about one of the most iconic books of all time, one of the most influential books and series of all time, and that is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. And before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and keep the conversation going in the comment section. And you can also follow me on social media. Links are in the description below. And if at any time you see me reading something and you say to yourself, it looks like he's reading something, it's because I am. I always keep notes just to keep the conversation moving and flowing, so I apologize in advance if I'm reading. But before we begin the actual book, let's talk about the author, J.K. Rowling. Now, J.K. Rowling is a writer and author from England, and she's written all of the Harry Potter books. And I don't know if you can see them, you probably can't, but I have pretty much every single one behind me because I am a huge fan of the series. But what a lot of people don't know is that the illustrator of this book is Thomas Taylor, and he is a writer and illustrator from England, and he's written and been a part of many other projects, particularly The Loudest Roar and The Biggest Splash. Okay, and the page count for the first edition of Harry Potter is 223 pages, but your copy, like my copy, probably has a lot more pages than that. The publisher is Bloomsbury, and the publication date is 1997. What a time to be alive. And as we all know, or maybe we don't know, I don't know, Harry Potter is a fantasy book about a young wizard. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But in other countries throughout the world, it is actually called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But it's still the same great book. So Harry Potter is a young boy living with his aunt, uncle, and cousin on Privet Drive. His Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon are very neglectful parental figures. And his cousin Dudley is a bully. I mean, this is a mean kid. So on Dudley's birthday, Harry has to sit there and watch his cousin open up a mountain full of gifts, right? A mountain full of gifts. And this sucks particularly because Harry is kind of forced to live in a living space that is not fit for a human being, right? That living space is under the staircase, right? So on Dudley's birthday, he has to watch him open up these gifts, and then they go to the zoo, right? They go to the zoo for Dudley's birthday, and at first the Dursleys don't even want to bring Harry with them. It isn't until they can't find a babysitter that they kind of just drag him along, right? So while at the zoo, they are in the reptile room. And at the reptile room, it is one of the first times that we really, as audience and as readers, we get to see or read about Harry using his magical powers. And he does this when he makes the glass separator from the reptile, from the snakes and the people, he makes it vanish. That's one of the first times we experience Harry's powers. So it's also safe to note that Harry was getting all of these letters from a mysterious place. And the Dursleys were not letting him see or read what was inside of these letters, right? So it turns out on Harry's 11th birthday, he is met by a half giant named Hagrid, right? And because his letters were going unanswered, Hagrid thought to come and personally give Harry his letter. And that letter turned out to be his acceptance letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry also learns that when he was 1 years old, that his parents were both killed by Lord Voldemort. And that is where, and Harry survived that, and because his mother put a charm to protect him, and that is how he got his famous lightning bolt scar. So now Hagrid takes Harry to Diagon Alley, which is a retail section of London. And here is where Harry buys school supplies, right? And he also purchases his wand, which has a feather from a phoenix, and that is the same feather that Voldemort has. So it's a connection between the two, right? So Hagrid also gifts Harry an owl named Hedwig. So about a month later, Harry has to go to school. He has to go to Hogwarts. So he goes to King's Cross Station, and he goes to the platform, the hidden platform, 9 3/4, and that is how he gets on the train to take him to the school, the Hogwarts Express, right? And on the train is where he meets Ronald Weasley. It's where he meets Hermione Granger, and it's when he meets Draco Malfoy, who is kind of like an antagonist to some degree. So while at Hogwarts, there is a ceremony for first year students called the Sorting Hat. And it's when everybody gets the Sorting Hat put on their head, and the Sorting Hat tells them which house they will be a part of. And in the story, there are 4 houses. It is Gryffindor, it is Slytherin, it is Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw. And when I was a kid, when I first read this book, I wanted nothing more but to be in the Ravenclaw house. And I have no idea why. I just think Ravenclaw sounded cool. But, at this point in my life, I'm all Gryffindor, okay? So Draco Malfoy gets selected to go to Slytherin, of course. And Harry, Hermione, and Ron all go to Gryffindor. It's also something to note that Harry is very good on his broomstick, right? And because of that, he is selected to take part on the Quidditch team. So it's also safe to say that Harry comes to really dislike his potions professor, Snape, right? Which is, it's always interesting when you read the rest of the series and you come back and you're like, Snape was really not that bad. And he did so much to actually protect Harry that Harry was just unaware of at the time, and you were unaware of as a reader. So that's really good storytelling on behalf of J.K. Rowling. Very and that's one of the things about Harry. It has a good it has continuity, right? So it's a good flowing story, and although there are loopholes, it does make a lot of sense. So Harry, Hermione, and Ron find out that there is like a secret trap door, right? There's a secret trap door that is being guarded by a 3-headed dog, right? And that's important because what's under that trap door? So I wanna kind of fast forward to a part where Harry is playing a Quidditch match, and his broomstick is starting to give him a lot of trouble. He's starting to buckle, right? And Hermione suspects that Snape is the person behind it because it looks like he's the person behind it. So, you can't really fault Hermione for thinking that. But that is actually not the case. But that's something that we find out later on in the book. So Harry, Hermione, and Ron suspect that the Philosopher's Stone is on the verge of being stolen. And the reason that they think that is because Gringotts Bank was broken into a day after Hagrid took something out of it for Dumbledore. And there's also a forest centaur named Firenze who warns Harry that Voldemort is plotting to steal the stone and to restore his physical body, right? So now we're gonna get into the nitty gritty of the actual story, right? So Dumbledore is lured away from Hogwarts, right? So he's lured away from Hogwarts, and then the three of them, they fear that this Philosopher's Stone, the Sorcerer's Stone, is going to be stolen. So what do Ron, Hermione, and Harry do? They go through the trap door. And so a series of obstacles prevent Ron, Hermione from continuing to go through with Harry. So now Harry is kind of left by himself, right? So then Harry encounters Professor Quirrell, right? Well, I didn't really talk about much earlier, but he encounters Professor Quirrell, and that's his defense against the dark arts professor. But unfortunately, Professor Quirrell reveals to Harry that he is the one that jinxed his broomstick. And it was actually Professor Snape who was trying to protect him. If you thought Professor Snape was bad, and you probably did, you're gonna feel even worse now. And when we get to the end of the series, you are gonna feel 100 times worse because of how you felt about Professor Snape. So we also learned that Voldemort is attached to the back of Professor Quirrell's head, because Professor Quirrell wears a wrap over his head, and he has another person in the back. So Professor Quirrell's, the back of his head is also Lord Voldemort's face. I remember when I first read that was like the shock of the century for me, okay? Professor Quirrell is also kind of being used as a puppet to steal the Sorcerer's Stone by Voldemort, right? So Harry is also forced to stand before the mirror of Erised, and it recognizes that Harry really has no interest in the stone. Like he's not greedy, he doesn't want any of it. So then it puts the stone in Harry's pocket, right? So then Professor Quirrell attempts to kill Harry, although he is unsuccessful because his flesh burns when he touches Harry. And that's because of the initial charm that Harry's mother put on him when he was a boy. So Harry's scar begins to burn when Professor Quirrell touches him, and then Harry passes out. So Harry wakes up in the school's infirmary, right? And Dumbledore is there, and he explains how Harry survived Voldemort. And it's because, like I said, his mother sacrificing herself and putting this charm to protect Harry. So Quirrell's hatred and Quirrell's greed was really his downfall, because once he came in contact with Harry, he burned. And Voldemort basically just abandoned him and just left him to die. So Voldemort escapes, right? So Dumbledore reveals to Harry, I forgot to talk about, I don't even know how I forgot to mention, Dumbledore gave Harry an invisibility cloak as a Christmas gift. I'm so sorry that I'm just bringing this up now. Please forgive me. But he gifts him an invisibility cloak for Christmas, and that's how they were getting around. Because you may have asked yourself, how are they getting around this massive school without being seen? It's because they had an invisibility cloak. Okay. All right. So Dumbledore reveals that he is the one who gifted Harry the invisibility cloak, right? He also reveals that the Sorcerer's Stone had been destroyed. And so during the end of the year, Gryffindor wins the House Cup. And unfortunately, our protagonist, our hero, Harry, must return back to Privet Drive with the Dursleys until the next school year. Okay, that is it. If I made a mistake, I'm sorry. So, why do I like this book? For a few reasons. I like the series in general because it grows with you, right? This is gonna, 7 books. If you read this when it came out, right, you literally grew up reading this book. And you can still do that now, right? If you read one Harry Potter book a year, that's 7 years. And a lot can change in a person's life in 7 years. Another thing that I really enjoy is I think the story is fascinating, right? It's the characters are all very interesting in different ways. The relationships between one another is interesting. And I love how each character grows in the series, but also in the story, and their relationship deepens. And it's really just such a fun book to read, and I would always recommend this book, right? It really, I know it gets a lot of heat because there's some loopholes, and some people are very critical about J.K. Rowling, the person, but this is one of my fondest memories of reading, and this book really got me into reading, right? So before I end, I really want to read one of my favorite quotes, and it is on page 118, and it is about the Sorting Hat. So it's on page 118, and it is about, and it comes from the Sorting Hat. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cat. And the Sorting Hat scene is one of my favorite, it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole book, and it's just a pleasant surprise, right? So, with that being said, I just want to say thank you for joining us for today's session of Books in the Trap. I am the Supreme Book Dealer. My name is Wes. Please keep the conversation going in the comments section. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. You can add me on social media. The information will be in the description. And you can also reach out via email. That is also in the description. And as always, thank you. Be well and keep reading. Peace.